Welcome to the Terror Time.
The first story is about the creepy haunted house. I was home alone that night. It wasn't unusual for me to be by myself, but there was something about this particular evening that felt off. A creeping sensation crawled down my spine as soon as darkness settled in. I couldn't explain it, but I kept feeling like someone or something was watching me. The house was too quiet, like the calm before a storm. Sitting in my living room, I distracted myself by scrolling through Instagram, watching harmless cat videos until I stumbled upon a horror video. Normally, these things didn't faze me, but tonight felt different. It was a clip of a paranormal activity investigation inside a supposedly haunted house. The investigators were documenting eerie occurrences, lights flickering, doors creaking open, and unsettling whispers that made my skin crawl. I knew I should have stopped watching, but something compelled me to keep going. Suddenly, a loud scream erupted from the video, making me jump. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled to pause it. The scream lingered in my ears, and I was about to turn the video off entirely when I heard a faint knock on the door. My breath hitched. Who would be knocking at this hour? I hesitated, but decided to check. As I approached the door, the air in the room seemed to grow heavier, as if the very atmosphere was thickening with dread. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my instincts screaming at me to stop, but curiosity won out. I opened it. There was no one there. The night outside was still, but something felt incredibly wrong. As I turned to close the door, I noticed something from the corner of my eye. A ghostly figure, or at least that's what it looked like, stood at the edge of the yard. A pale, supernatural form that seemed to shimmer in the faint moonlight. My blood ran cold. Was I seeing things? I slammed the door shut and locked it, backing away slowly, trying to shake the image from my mind. But then, the knock came again. Louder this time. I forced myself to ignore it and ran upstairs, locking myself in my room. I texted my friend about what had happened, but before I could hit send, I heard footsteps. Creepy, deliberate footsteps. They echoed through the house, getting closer and closer to my door. My breathing quickened as the air grew colder. Suddenly a voice, a deep, evil voice, whispered my name. I froze, terror gripping me like a vice. I was certain now something wasn't just watching me. It was here, in the house. A cold draft swept through the room, and then I felt it. Something brushed past me. I turned to find a shadowy figure standing right behind me. It was no longer a pale ghost. It was a full-bodied spirit, eyes glowing with malicious intent. I could feel the dark energy radiating from it. My body refused to move as the air filled with an oppressive, suffocating presence. The figure moved closer, and I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my chest, like claws digging into my skin. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The air felt thick, almost like I was drowning. My vision blurred, and I could barely make out the shape of the demon looming over me, grinning as if it enjoyed my suffering. Then, just as I thought I would pass out, everything stopped. The air cleared, and the presence was gone. I gasped, finally able to breathe again. But I wasn't alone. Something had been left behind. A series of cryptic scratches on the wall, forming a symbol I couldn't understand. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the entity hadn't really left. Objects began moving on their own, strange whispers filled the night, and I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't long before I found myself drawn back to that same haunted house I had seen in the video, the one where the paranormal activity had started. What I learned shook me to my core. The house was connected to a series of unsolved murders over a century ago. Each person who had lived there had either disappeared or died under strange circumstances, and now it seemed that the ghost had followed me. I tried to get help, tried to find someone who could exorcise the spirit. But no matter what I did, the darkness only grew stronger and the feeling of dread more overwhelming. It wasn't just a haunting, it was something much worse, something ancient, something demonic. I realized then I had unknowingly invited a force of pure evil into my life. And now there's no escape. The second story is about the night shift nightmare. Working the night shift at a convenience store was never glamorous, but I didn't mind the quiet. That night, however, felt different. There was an eerie stillness in the air, something that made my skin prickle. I chalked it up to exhaustion until I glanced at the store's CCTV monitor. On one of the screens, I noticed a figure standing in the corner of the parking lot. It was too dark to make out any details, but the sight unsettled me. The figure stood unnaturally still, like a statue. After a few minutes, they disappeared from the screen entirely, as if they'd simply vanished into thin air. A paranormal explanation crossed my mind, but I brushed it off. Surely it was just a glitch in the system. Hours passed uneventfully, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. As the night dragged on, things took a turn for the worse. I was stocking shelves when I heard a loud scream from outside. My heart leaped into my throat as I rushed to the window. The parking lot was empty. There was no one around. Fearing the worst, I checked the CCTV again. The footage showed nothing, except that strange figure had reappeared, closer this time, right in front of the store entrance. But when I looked out the window, no one was there. A wave of cold dread washed over me. Desperately trying to keep my cool, I replayed the footage. This time, I noticed something even more chilling. The figure had no face. It was just a shadowy blur, like a black hole in the shape of a human. I couldn't explain it, but I knew this wasn't something natural. My gut told me I was dealing with something far more sinister. The hours stretched on, and I found myself growing more paranoid with every minute. Strange things started happening inside the store. The lights flickered, objects fell off the shelves, and a ghostly whisper echoed through the aisles. It sounded like a name I didn't recognize. Around 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to get out, but something kept pulling me back to the CCTV. As I watched the monitor, the figure from earlier began moving toward the entrance. My pulse raced as the door slowly creaked open, but no one came in. Suddenly, a gust of wind rushed through the store, followed by an overwhelming feeling of dread. I could feel eyes on me, though I saw no one. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and began searching for local unsolved mysteries. I needed answers, anything to explain what was happening. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. Years ago, there had been a series of brutal crimes near this store. A man had murdered several people during a robbery gone wrong. Witnesses claimed the man had been possessed by a demon, his actions guided by something beyond human comprehension. The murderer was never caught, and many believed his spirit still haunted the area. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was that what I was dealing with? A haunted location, cursed by the presence of a vengeful spirit? Before I could process this, the lights in the store went out completely. I was plunged into darkness, and the only source of light was the glow from the CCTV monitor. On the screen, the faceless figure was now inside the store, standing just a few feet away from me. Panic seized me, and I stumbled back, knocking over a display of chips. A voice, low and menacing, filled the room. "You shouldn't be here," it said. My body went numb with fear. I didn't need any more convincing. I bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I reached for the handle, it felt like something was holding it shut. Desperation set in as I yanked with all my strength, finally breaking free and racing into the parking lot. I didn't stop until I was a few blocks away. Only then did I look back. The store stood still in the distance, but I could see a shadowy figure watching me from the doorway. It was as if the nightmare was following me, refusing to let me escape. The next morning I called in sick and never went back to that job. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, the store was mysteriously shut down. Rumors spread about strange occurrences, and some people claimed to have seen ghost videos circulating online of the store being haunted. To this day, I don't know what I encountered that night. Whether it was a lost spirit or a malevolent entity, I'll never know for sure. But one thing is certain, what I experienced was no ordinary horror story. It was real, and it was terrifying. And whatever it was, it's still out there, waiting. The third story is about the sleep paralysis terror. I've always been skeptical about the paranormal, dismissing most stories as fiction or exaggeration. But what happened to me recently changed that. It's something I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't experienced it myself. A chilling encounter that still gives me nightmares. It started one night after I'd spent hours binge-watching creepy videos on Instagram. There was one about a haunted house, supposedly caught on film by ghost hunters. The video captured eerie moments, objects moving by themselves, strange sounds, and even what appeared to be a real ghost lurking in the background. I couldn't stop thinking about it, even though I knew it was probably staged. Later that night, I crawled into bed, trying to shake off the images from my mind. But as I drifted off to sleep, I felt something strange. My body froze. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't move. My mind was awake, but my body refused to respond. I had heard of sleep paralysis before, but this felt different, darker. I lay there completely still when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A shadowy figure stood at the foot of my bed, watching me. My heart pounded as fear gripped me, but I couldn't move or scream. The figure slowly crept closer, its outline becoming clearer. It wasn't human. Its eyes were hollow, and its face twisted in an unnatural, grotesque expression. I felt like I was in a horror movie, unable to escape the terror unfolding before me. Suddenly, the figure vanished, and I could move again. Gasping for breath, I sat up, drenched in sweat. I tried convincing myself it was a bad dream, the result of watching too many scary videos. But deep down, I knew it was something more. A few nights later, it happened again. This time, the figure didn't just stand at the end of my bed, it reached toward me. I felt its icy fingers brush against my skin, and I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. The fear was overwhelming, and all I could do was pray that it would stop. When I finally broke free of the paralysis, I rushed to turn on the lights. My room was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Something was there with me, watching from the shadows. The experiences became more frequent, each one more terrifying than the last. Desperate for answers, I started researching paranormal stories online. That's when I came across a video of an exorcist talking about sleep paralysis and how it could be linked to demonic activity. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I read, the more it started to make sense. One night, I decided to record myself sleeping. I thought maybe if I captured the experience on video, I could prove it was all in my head. But what I found shook me to my core. As I reviewed the footage the next morning, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. In the corner of the room, near my closet, was a shadow. A figure just like the one I had seen during my episodes of paralysis. It stood there, unmoving, watching me sleep. I was horrified. I had managed to capture a ghost caught on camera, and there was no denying what I had seen. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I reached out to a local paranormal group. They were excited by my footage and eager to investigate. They believed I might be dealing with a haunted house, a place where spirits could easily manifest. According to them, the entity I encountered could be linked to the history of the land, or something far more sinister. The ghost hunters spent hours investigating my home, setting up cameras and equipment to detect any paranormal activity. Throughout the night, they captured strange occurrences, unexplained noises, cold spots, and even an eerie voice on their recorder. But the most terrifying moment came when one of their team members suddenly felt a pressure on their chest, much like my experience with sleep paralysis. They were convinced this was no ordinary haunting. After the investigation, the team concluded that my house was indeed haunted, and they suggested I consult an exorcist to cleanse the place. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Part of me believed that whatever was haunting me wasn't tied to the house. It felt more personal, like the entity had attached itself to me, drawn by something darker. It was only later, when I started researching the history of my neighborhood, that I stumbled upon a true story about a murder that had taken place on this very land decades ago. The victim had been a young woman who had lived in a house near mine. Her killer was never caught, and some believed her restless spirit still roamed the area, seeking revenge. The more I learned, the more I realized what I experienced wasn't just a coincidence. It was real. I had been targeted by a vengeful spirit, and now there was no escaping it. I still experience the paralysis from time to time, but I no longer try to fight it. I've accepted that this scary movie I'm living in is my new reality. And the worst part is, it's only just beginning. The fourth story is about the Forgotten Asylum. It all started with a group of friends and a dare. We'd been deep into urban exploration for months, visiting abandoned places, hoping to capture something unusual, but nothing could have prepared us for the asylum. It had been closed for decades. rumored to be haunted by the tortured spirits of former patients. Despite the creepy stories surrounding the place, we thought we were fearless. The night we went, the air was thick with an ominous energy. Even standing outside the crumbling building gave me chills. As we made our way in, the eerie silence made every step echo like a scream. The further we ventured, the more uneasy I felt. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. We reached a room said to be the heart of the hauntings. According to ghost theory, spirits of the most tortured souls would linger where the worst treatments occurred. My gut told me we were crossing a line. Suddenly we heard a faint voice, almost like a whisper. Everyone froze. It wasn't one of us. It was as if a spirit was watching, waiting. My friend, eager to debunk the rumors, pulled out his camera, hoping to catch something on tape. That's when we saw it. A shadow moved across the far wall, disappearing into the darkness. The temperature in the room plummeted, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over us. It was no longer a game. We weren't chasing after legends or scary stories. This was a real horror story unfolding in front of us. Without warning, one of my friends screamed and dropped to the ground, clutching his chest. He swore something had pushed him. Panic set in, and we all bolted toward the exit, but the doors wouldn't budge. It felt like something or someone didn't want us to leave. A sinister laugh echoed through the halls, sending spooky chills down our spines. We knew we had encountered something evil, possibly even demons. We finally forced the door open and escaped, but none of us have been the same since. To this day, I can't forget that night. It wasn't just an exploration, it was an encounter with the paranormal, a true scary story that left us with scars that go beyond the physical. The fifth and last story is about the conjuring in the woods. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip, a chance to get away from the noise of the city and clear our heads. We didn't expect to find ourselves in the middle of a paranormal encounter that would haunt us forever. The forest we camped in had a spooky reputation. Locals often spoke of a haunted house deep within the woods where people vanished without a trace. Naturally, we dismissed it as another one of those exaggerated mystery stories until we experienced it firsthand. It started with strange sounds, branches snapping, distant whispers. Nothing too alarming at first. But the horror ambience around us grew thicker as the night went on. One of my friends, always the thrill seeker, decided to document our experience, turning it into a horror short film. Little did we know it wouldn't be fiction. During the night shift, while the rest of us slept, my friend recorded a chilling scene that changed everything. He had pointed the camera towards the trees, hoping to catch some wildlife. What he captured instead was a shadow moving unnaturally fast through the brush. The next morning, we watched the footage, and there it was, a real ghost caught on camera. Convinced it was a trick of the light, we ventured deeper into the woods, following the trail of the shadow. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the air became. We stumbled upon an old cabin that seemed frozen in time, the rumored haunted house. As soon as we entered, the temperature dropped sharply, and the air felt thick with malevolent energy. My heart raced as we explored, the sense of dread overwhelming. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, trapping us inside. It was as if the house itself didn't want us to leave. We could feel a supernatural presence watching us, feeding off our fear. Out of nowhere, my friend's camera began recording on its own, capturing a figure standing at the far end of the room, a ghost, as real as anything I'd ever seen. It looked at us with hollow eyes before vanishing. To this day, I can't explain what we encountered. What started as a fun ghost adventure turned into one of the most terrifying true horror stories I've ever experienced. Whatever haunted that cabin in the woods still lingers, waiting for the next unsuspecting visitor.